Have you been craving more Jason Kidd and Kevin Durant slop with regards
Eh,
to the Knicks? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you haven't. I probably haven't been. And yet, here we are. There's more of it. So we're going to talk about the latest on Jason Kidd and Kevin Durant right now on Locked on Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right. Welcome in to Locked on Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. We want to thank you all for making Locked on Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. I'm Alex Wolfe. I'm Aaron-Chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrict.land. And he's Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster and the Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. And today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. So on today's show, we got some new Jason Kidd news, conflicting reports. The whole internet is abuzz with Jason Kidd rumors. So lots of different things coming from Mark Stein, Brian Windhorst, and Sam Amick, highly credentialed reporters in their own rights, and all of them have vastly different things to say. Well, actually, Stein and Amick kind of agree with each other, but we'll tell you all about it. And then also from Brian Windhorst, some Kevin Durant notes, also from Sam Amico, another Kevin Durant note. So there's some Kevin Durant stuff going around. Apparently he's going to be traded soon, and apparently the Knicks might be interested. So we're going to get into that a little later in the show. But to open, Gavin, more on the coaching search, which really isn't much of a search right now. It's just kind of daily updates on where the Knicks stand with Jason Kidd, whether the Mavericks will allow the Knicks to speak with Jason Kidd. I'll lead with the first note, and then if you want to hit the second note, and then we can hit the third note, but whatever. Mark Stein, who's pretty well plugged in to the Dallas side of things, I believe conducts business out of Dallas. He's always on like this one Mavs podcast down there, I know for sure. So Mark Stein had said, I do not think he's looking to leave Dallas. He's very settled here. His family is very settled here, and he's very close with the two superstars, Kyrie and Anthony Davis, who are in place. So that was the note from Mark Stein. But then Brian Windhorst had something kind of totally different.
Yeah, in direct contrast to that, Brian Windhorst earlier today to the point that I almost did a second episode today, Alex, and I'm happy I didn't, given that this was contradicted within about 6 hours. The Knicks absolutely would like to hire Jason Kidd to be their next head coach. The asking for permission would be formality. There's not going to be an interview. So that is pretty definitively the exact opposite, at least in terms of the Knicks' interest. I guess where they could align is that perhaps Jason Kidd was never on board with that, which seems to be what Sam Amick and others are indicating.
Yeah, and so Sam's report was, this one's a little longer, but I think this is all valuable context. Kidd has been present at the Mavericks practice facility this past week as they've held workouts and has functioned in a business as usual capacity. What's more, the negotiations with former Toronto Raptors and Phoenix Suns head coach Jay Triano for a lead assistant coaching position with the Mavs have been revealing when it comes to Kidd. According to a league source, Mavs general manager Nico Harrison made it clear to Triano during the process that Kidd would remain the head coach. Triano, the league source said, agreed to terms on the assistant position on Tuesday. NBA reporter Jake Fisher was first to report on the Mavericks' interest in Triano. Shout out to Jake Fisher, who also works for Mark Stein. So yeah, this is interesting. I mean, Windhorst also noted it was a spot on ESPN, I think, where he said all this stuff earlier today. He had also said, made sure to bring up like, hey, like, Jason Kidd has famously forced his way out of coaching a team once before, somewhat suddenly, to become the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks instead of the Brooklyn Nets like 10, 11 years ago. So maybe this isn't totally out of the realm of possibility. From that perspective, I say, yeah, I guess I could see that. But from the perspective of everything that we know about the Leon Rose Knicks, particularly in recent years, whatever you think is telegraphed in front of your nose typically is not the thing that's going to happen. So I find myself just kind of sitting back and just waiting to hear something definitive, or to just hear, like, I'm surprised that we haven't heard yet of just while they're doing this song and dance with Kidd, allegedly, which maybe they've called for permission. Maybe they haven't even called for permission yet. Like, we don't even know if that's the case. Like, nobody can really give a straight answer on if they've actually asked the Mavericks to interview him or not. I think that, like, we're in this weird position where they haven't even, at least as far as we know, started interviewing people yet. And so this maybe just feels like, as I called it at the top of the show, kind of just slop. Like, is this, I can't tell if this is just people wildly speculating or just kind of hearing like, hey, they're into Kid, but like there's nothing to actually suggest that they'll be able to get him. It seems like the only names we've heard so far are coaches that are presently employed with other teams, which is a little weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to with this front office, we always seem to know less than we think we do, and there have been times where we freaked out about stuff, and then 2 days later, something completely to the contrary comes out. I think my only concern coming out of this is one, like it was what we talked about, which I don't think we need to relitigate, but if you're going to fire Tom Thibodeau, presumably you're going to go in the direction of young and offensive creativity, where Jason Kidd seems more like a couple gradients over in one direction, couple gradients over in another direction, but you're doing a lot of the same stuff, and maybe it would work out. Like there's a lot of evidence that Jason Kidd, at least in his time on the Mavs, has developed into a very good NBA coach. I think what I'm surprised about is that this seems to be catching the Knicks out of left field, because to your point, we're not hearing anything about any other interviews. We're not hearing anything about anyone else being seriously pursued. If you're going to believe the report from Brian Windhorst, like this is the Knicks kind of getting caught with their pants down, which you just don't really typically see with this front office. Like, I mean, maybe you can argue like the combination of iHeart leaving and Mitchell Robinson being hurt this summer, like that caught them by surprise, and they made a quote unquote panic deal for Cat. To me, that situation seemed more about that they always wanted Cat and he was available, and they also happened to need a center. So there's no way for us to know. So I don't know how much it's worth talking about, but I'm deeply fascinated, like what is actually going on inside the Knicks front office, and whether Kidd actually was always priority one, or it's totally plausible they've set up 10 interviews behind the scenes that'll all come out in short time.
Yeah, it would be really interesting if this was just like the biggest smokescreen ever. If they just were like if Leon actually knows Jason Kidd and is like, hey man, let's talk on the phone for a minute or whatever, like within the bounds of not tampering with you, because we know the Mavs love to, file complaints with the league about that stuff. But, hey, let's just flirt with each other a little bit and get everybody all in a tizzy while I find my actual coach here, because I know
and it helps Kidd too, right? Because he can leverage that into a raise.
He could potentially get a big raise out of it. That is a possibility that he could just leverage this into like, well, if you don't want me to try to, Brooklyn Nets you and go off to the other team, like, you better give me more money to stick around here with this weird semi-rebuilding, semi-contending team that you're trying to use here with Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, and Cooper Flagg. Like, it's just a bizarre roster that they're going to have next year. But yeah, I can't see where Kidd would really like want to cause the amount of problems needed to do this. Granted, again, the Brooklyn situation did happen, so he did, and that was fairly messy from what I remember, with him like basically demanding that they let him go coach the Bucks instead. And then eventually I think the Nets got some form of compensation. I don't know if it was like a second round.
It was two second round picks.
2 second-round picks, which if I'm the Knicks, I'm like, I wouldn't even do that, dude. But I'm me, and if Leon Rose is really that into Kidd, maybe that's just his preference. But yeah, I don't know. It's very confusing. All this is just like, it makes me wish that we could just reach the end of this saga already, because it's like every day there's like 3 different reports from 3 different reporters that all say different things somehow about how this process is going, and it's all just about Jason Kidd. Like, I feel like we haven't heard a single other name in days, which is a really annoying part, just because I feel like there are other very qualified candidates out there that the Knicks could be looking at. But maybe we can talk about that in just a moment, actually, so we can get into some of the other candidates that we're maybe hoping to see. I know that we've kind of wish listed before, but at this particular juncture, the Knicks have the only open head coaching position in the league right now. So they kind of have their choice of plenty of unemployed coaches, and yet apparently are only lusting after one employed coach. So we'll see how that ends up going, but we can speculate a little bit more. And then, of course, get into some Kevin Durant slop to end the episode from also Brian Windhorst, who's just the slop master right now as far as dealing all this slop out to everybody in the offseason. But first, we're going to talk about the other coaching candidates we would potentially want to see in just a moment when we get back in.
But first, we want to tell you about our good friends over at Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you are wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it incredibly easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. Delivery is free, fast, and totally hassle-free, even with the larger items. Now when I'm hosting friends or just unwinding with the book, it genuinely feels like my own private retreat. So don't wait. Make the outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair. Enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, what's up, guys? We are back here on Locked On Knicks. Alex, we touched on it a little bit in the Tom Thibodeau just got fired, the world is burning episode. But who are the other names out there that you're interested in? I haven't deep dived it yet, but I certainly have 2 or 3 that are circulating in my head that I would prefer out of the group that's been referenced.
I mean, I think of the so obviously I think we're both pretty well on record of Johnny Bryant being a guy that just makes a lot of sense. Familiarity with the team already. He drew rave reviews. I think that you can kind of put 2 and 2 together that like the offense, I think, took a huge step back in terms of creativity this past year. And in terms of like the sets they were running and the fact that they just kind of gradually got less creative as the year went on. I think you can kind of glean from that a little bit. And I mean, maybe this is speculative, like nobody has for sure said this, but you remove Johnny Bryant and suddenly the offense with more offensive talent on it is playing less to those talents. You wonder if maybe that had something to do with losing your lead assistant, who was a pretty big voice on the team, it seemed like, and who clearly has really good offensive chops as far as drawing up plays and finding ways to get guys involved and stuff like that. So, as was evidenced, if not by his Knicks tenure, then by, how he was part of the staff that turned Cleveland into a juggernaut this year during the regular season and unlocked a lot of things in their offense. So, even if it wasn't all him, like definitely learned some lessons there and definitely did some good stuff with the Knicks. So he's probably number 1 for me. And then if I was going to pick one of the other names that's been mentioned, I mean, I'll tell you what, if all this news about Jason Kidd was actually about Chris Finch from the Timberwolves, I would be over the moon. I would be like, dude, yeah, like please move heaven and earth to get this guy to the Knicks, because he's the guy that you have seen, like, especially if you don't plan on making a huge roster move this offseason and trading Cat or something like that. Finch is the guy that created a top, they were the top defense last season, right? Like, were they not the number one overall defense? Like a number 1 overall defense in the league, granted with Rudy Gobert also, but with Karl Anthony Towns at the 4, which, like, I mean, we've talked about it a number of times. It was more of an offseason topic because we never really got to see it during the regular season. So it was more like right after the Knicks traded for Towns that we talked about this, and then kind of never really got to talk about it much again. But that defensive alignment can be pretty similar. Like Mitchell Robinson maybe isn't Rudy Gobert entirely, but he can do a lot of the stuff that Rudy Gobert does, and some things I think even better. Like I think the offensive rebounding is, I still think Mitch is probably the best one in the league. Like, but his ability in space I think is arguably better than Gobert too. If he gets like stranded on an island against like a wing player on the perimeter, I think Mitch can handle that a little better. So I think if you hand Chris Finch those tools and then say, hey, no more Anthony Edwards, but you get Jalen Brunson, and no more Jaden McDaniels, but you get OG Anunoby, like who's a much better offensive player, I think, than McDaniels. So it's like you get all the, and Mikal Bridges, say nothing of him, who's, we talked about in his player review, but I think maybe it was not quite used to the maximum of what he could have been used this year as well. I think that's a pretty solid choice. Like if the Knicks were going to try to really thirst after an incumbent coach somewhere, why not Chris Finch? I think that's the guy to go after.
Yeah, I think the single thing I want the most is a thorough search. Like I get it if Jason Kidd is overwhelmingly your favorite candidate. Personally, I would interview 12 people, right? I would see what you could find. I would see if you could find the next Mark Dagnall, the next Joe Mazzulla waiting out there. And I know that's a lot to risk with these guys in the heart of their career and like a coach acclimating to his first year on the job. But we saw it with Mazzulla, right? You can catch lightning on the bottle and make a run. I mean, how long Dagnall's been in OKC? 3 years, 4 years? Like you can win with a first-time head coach or a relatively new head coach. So I think the process is the single biggest thing for me. But I'm with you on Johnny Bryant. I mean, we all know about his guard development. Obviously, that is a nice thing to have on your staff. The bigger thing to me is the year under Kenny Atkinson, where Cleveland ran, if not the league's most creative offense, like pretty darn close, maximized their spacing despite having one big who couldn't shoot in Jared Allen and one big who could kind of sort of shoot in Evan Mobley, and yet they were consistently the best space team in the league. I know they had pretty ideal bench personnel for that. I know they flamed out in the second round. I think a lot of that was due to a myriad of injuries, and Johnny Bryant had a year in that system and a year to learn under Atkinson beyond, to your point, what he clearly already brought to the Knicks from a game planning perspective. And he has a great relationship with Jalen Brunson, which obviously is not something that can be discounted. And in a lot of ways, like, is the name of the game with so many of these head coaches. I'm with you on Finch. Though I personally don't think Cat Mitch is really the path going forward. I think if you have Cat, you should be playing 5 out and doing your best to insulate him defensively. Around that, I actually think Finch is flexible enough to play either way. I think he's tactically pretty versatile. You look to that. I think it was 2022, maybe it was 2023 in Minnesota, where they blitzed in a way that you just don't really see modern defenses blitz. And it was very like high risk, high reward style of defense. And it didn't always work. It certainly worked better, if I'm remembering correctly, first half of the season than second. But I just love that he had that in his bag to say, I'm going to go completely away from convention. I'm going to go completely away of, I think, what logic would dictate you would typically do with a relatively slow-footed big like Karl-Anthony Towns. And I'm just going to play high variance basketball, and I'm going to live with some layups. We're going to create some turnovers, and I think our offense is good enough to compensate. And he got like an incredibly young team to the playoffs. And I that always sticks with me. He got that team back to the conference finals each of the last 2 years. I know this season benefited from some luck with Steph Curry getting hurt, but I really like everything about the guy. Again, you don't always see the warts from afar. I'm sure there are Minnesota fans who are like, man, if we could get Tom Thibodeau back in here, what could we do? Maybe not them, since they already experienced it. Final guy I wanted to mention was Terry Stotts, a name I've seen other Knicks analysts throw out. I've always been a really big fan of his. I always look back to that 2019 run with the Blazers to the conference finals. I'm just going to read you some of the key pieces on that roster. Al-Farouq Aminu, Seth Curry, Ennis, the artist formerly known as Cantor Freedom, Mo Harkless, Rodney Hood, Scalabissier, Jake Layman, Myers Leonard, Yusuf Nurkic, who was a better player back then, Nick Stauskas, Gary Trent, and of course, Damon CJ. But he has experienced winning big with a small guard who's a defensive liability, and his installation for 2 small guards in his lineup was Al-Farouq Aminu and Mo Harkless. It was not OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. Like he worked wonders with those teams, widely considered one of the best offensive minds in the league for a decade plus. I understand if people are averse to hiring an older coach, given what happened with Tibbs, but I think he could work wonders with this offense. And I do think it's totally plausible to find the right defensive coordinator out there. And I don't think his time in Portland is necessarily evidence that he can't coach defense on a high level, given the fact that they did not really have ideal personnel for it. And again, we're still able to make a couple nice playoff runs, make it to the conference finals, despite less than ideal personnel.
Yeah, I don't hate that idea. And honestly, that kind of goes back to, I mean, I've said it like, I feel like I've said it 100 times, probably even like 5 times. Privately, I've said it a bunch of times, like this week, of just my ideal, I think, still just comes down to do a similar thing to what they did with Tibbs, ironically, where hire like Johnny Bryan, if that's your guy, if that's the guy that they pinpoint, but hire a really handpicked experienced assistant coaching staff at the top, and maybe it's the Stotts that you hire for that. My dream guy is Jeff Van Gundy. Like, if you could somehow bring him back to New York with the job that he did with the Clippers this year, he got a lot of praise and a lot of credit for what they were able to accomplish with their defense this year.
Yeah.
So if you could bring him over, like, just create like a carefully curated, 4-man lead bench staff, and then let Bryant fill out the positions beyond that, the end of the bench guys, whatever, but like, or the second row of coaching seats guys, the guys that sit behind the player row, but like, give him, a very experienced staff to lean on, and let a young guy who has the respect of the roster and the respect of the players, like, cook a bit, but have a really strong support system behind him. I think that's a really smart idea. I think it's worked for a lot of other teams. And we've seen like so many young coaches that, they do really well. And like, I think it gets underreported a little bit, but behind almost every like fresh new young coach that gets hired to some team, there's usually a staff of like 2 or 3 guys, a lot of times at least one of them being a former head coach, and some really experienced assistants that get kind of handpicked to sit on the bench with that guy and help him learn. And I think that's extremely valuable. So I think that's probably my number one way that I want this to go for the Knicks. And hopefully we see, like you said, I just want to start seeing a robust interview process soon. Like, I don't think it's necessarily the right answer to just like zero in on someone that you think is maybe the right guy. Like, even for the relationship that Leon had with Tibbs, he had a pretty robust interview process, which included Jason Kidd, which included Kenny Atkinson, and I think a couple other names. I think there was at least 4 or 5 that they interviewed for when Tibbs ultimately got the job. Came down to Tibbs and Atkinson, but even with that, it was a decision. Like, it was pretty well reported that like they were legitimately kind of like split in the front office between who to hire, and like really did their due diligence, and then ultimately settled on Tibbs as the guy. So from that perspective, like, I would love if we could start hearing some stuff about that soon. That said, they might just kind of be having a little bit of like, just exhibiting a little bit of decorum here and waiting for the finals to finish or something before they start just like en masse bringing guys in. Maybe there's even someone on the assistant coaching staff of OKC or the Pacers that they're interested in that they want to speak to first. I don't know. And we won't know until we start hearing these things. But for now, it's just more Jason Kidd slop every day. But that's not all. We also have Kevin Durant slop from Brian Windhorst and from Sam Amico, not to be confused with Sam Amick. So we got a little more KD stuff going on. Does he want to do the Knicks potentially want to trade for him? Whatever. Well, the words Durant and Knicks were in the same sentence. So we're going to talk about it in the next segment when we get back in to Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to let you know about our friends over at Game Time. And there's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. In fact, we're in the finals. And if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. But I'll tell you what, let me just go off script here and say nobody from New York is going to try to go see Pacers Oklahoma City in the finals. And if you do, you're a real true just basketball fan and not at all bitter like me. I'm going to be going to see the Mets soon. It's baseball season. I need to get some Mets baseball in my life. I need some of that Citi Field food. Those of you that are Yankees fans, I'm sure you feel the same way about wanting to go see the Yankees. I always hit up Game Time because it's great. I could just decide after work one day, like, hey, you know what? I think I feel like going to a baseball game. Then you find those sweet, sweet last minute deals. You can get in on the super cheap. Sometimes you can find some seats where you're like, man, what is this, like 2008? Like, what is this price? I didn't think I could get into sporting events for this cheap anymore. So it's pretty great. But yeah, definitely check out Game Time. Go to a baseball game, because I know none of you are trying to fly out to Oklahoma City. I don't know who's going to fly out there to not see their basketball team. Anyway, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gavin, it is Kevin Durant time. You know what time it is because Durant's name has been used in the same sentence as the Knicks again. Another Brian Windhorst report, which something he says about the Knicks better come true, or else I'm on the verge of just being like, who are you speaking to at MSG, Brian Windhorst? Are you speaking to like a concession worker or something? Like, I'm really curious where half these half these Knicks scoops are coming from because he's going, everyone else is zigging and he's just zagging the complete opposite direction. But Kevin Durant, it was reported, I forget who had this report. Honestly, I read it. I forgot to write it down, but someone had the report basically being like, it's expected that Durant's going to be on the move in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then Brian Windhorst said Kevin Durant is expected to be traded. Oh, he literally is this one. Kevin Durant is expected to be traded in the coming weeks, and the Knicks are among the teams likely to pursue him, per Brian Windhorst. But then Sam Amico said Kevin Durant reportedly prefers a trade to San Antonio. I think I've also seen that the Rockets are on the short list, presumably, and
Minnesota.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know where the Knicks get themselves into that conversation or how or why they get themselves into that conversation. But, Gavin, if we've already talked about this a little bit, but we got to talk about it again because it's the off season and we can't get any real coaching search news. So, how do you feel about this latest potential foray for the Knicks to try to get Kevin Durant? Or do you think there's any legs to this at all?
Yeah, I understand the Knicks doing their due diligence. We said it last show, like he is still an extraordinary basketball player. I think, and just based on LeBron's trajectory, based on Steph's trajectory, I would expect him to, even if he's 5% worse next season, he's still, I think, probably a top 15 player in the league at minimum. And like you can definitely talk yourself into higher conversations. I don't know how you justify trading. Like, obviously, Karl Anthony Towns is named number one. Throw down those discussions. OG Anunoby is named number two. Throw down those discussions. I just think I know your defense completely falls apart without OG Anunoby. Cat is a little more interesting, right? Because then you can start Mitch. You can insulate your defense. You can play Brunson ISO ball. You could play KD ISO ball. But I go back to, if you're going to do that, you might as well have just kept Tibbs, right? If it just, hey, KD, go do your you know what, JB, go cook out there. Like Tibbs could have done that while coaching a great drop defense with Mitchell Robinson. So if that's the plan, like, and maybe that's why they want to bring in Jason Kidd, because there will be some stylistic overlap there, and he can coach the heck out of a defense and just let his guys cook offensively. And obviously we've seen stuff where he's enhanced a Kyrie Irving and he has enhanced the Luka Doncic. You are just closing your window, right, relative to having Cat on your team. And maybe it's worth it, because maybe the Knicks look at it as, we'd rather have a 20% chance at winning a title for 1 year and a 15% chance the next year before that window completely slams, versus having Cat and feeling like we have maybe, like, I don't know, 7%, 8% chance for 5 years. People who are better at statistics than me can do the math on that. I do think for next season, I would give the Knicks a better chance at winning a championship with KD instead of Cat. It is just a much smaller window. To me, OG makes no sense. If there's some wizardry you could pull and be like, hey, Phoenix, you loved Mikal Bridges once, go take him. And it's Mikal, maybe plus Mitch and some other stuff to make the salaries work. For Kevin Durant, like, yeah, I'd be on board with that, because I think you just have an overwhelming amount of talent that way. It is just a real stretch to get the salaries to that point that I don't even know if that's totally plausible or possible. But I think that's where I'm at on it. Like, I see the upside there. Just actually doing it feels like a little old Knicksy in a bad way, even though I believe in Kevin Durant in a way I probably didn't believe in some of those big names in the past.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, I mean, I'm pretty well on record as saying I just think personality wise, I don't love adding Kevin Durant to any team that I follow, which would just be the Knicks in this case, unless he's going to get traded to the Mets somehow.
Yeah.
But I just don't think I would love having Durant on the team, because he just doesn't seem like a real team player anymore. Something about every single team that he's gone to in recent memory, even the Warriors, like, just kind of crumbling. And the Warriors managed to pick the pieces up well enough to win another championship after he left. But elsewhere, it's just like it seems like every other stop they've made, the Nets and now the Suns, it ends in total disaster.
Can I throw out, are we sure
yeah.
it's that Kevin Durant is a terrible teammate and not Kevin Durant is a terrible judge of character? And he's like, Draymond Green, that sounds good. Kyrie Irving, that sounds good. Eventually, not that he didn't choose this, but Bradley Beal on an untradeable $60 million contract playing terribly. That sounds good. Like, I wonder if it's more so that, just given that his teammates comment on him very positively, but as you and I have talked about, and not all stuff we can get into on air, there is an abundant amount of evidence that he's not always the best person to be around.
Yeah, I mean, I would also argue like the Bradley Beal move felt like it was something that he was probably given the opinion to, or the ability to express his opinion on.
Again, bad judge of character, or
Right.
not even character with Beal, but bad judge of player value on
Talent,
contracts.
exactly. Which it seems like Durant is still just kind of hung up on the idea of like super teaming, which I think that's probably my biggest reason for not wanting to go down that road is that the Knicks right now, I really do believe that with a few tweaks around the margins, even with Cat, who I know that a lot of people are not, I think a lot of people are not sold. Well, actually, a lot of people are not sold. It's like 50-50.
Yeah.
A large number, or maybe like 25%, 50% is fine with it. But like, there's a large portion of the fan base that seems very vocal now that they don't think that Brunson can get it done as like the lead guy on a championship team. There's also a very vocal part of the fan base that is like, I don't think Cat's the right guy to win a championship with. Personally, I kind of feel like we saw this postseason that the amount of talent in this group is crazy. Like, and the fact that with the level of coaching they were getting from Tibbs and the level of rotation management and everything else, which we've pretty much all agreed, and apparently most of the players agreed too, was pretty bad. This postseason, they still managed to push it to 6 games in a conference finals and almost make the NBA finals, which is crazy. Like they were, I mean, granted, they got there on the razor's edge, but they also lost on the razor's edge. Like there's a world where that game 1 shot doesn't go down. The Knicks win that series in 7 games. So I mean, I think that they do have the talent, and I think that right now they have a roster more similar to the 2 teams that are in the finals, which seems to be the type of team that is the blueprint now, which is not necessarily going all in on like the as many stars as you can fit salary wise, plus a bunch of minimum salary guys, or just like piece together mid-level exception guys, but like a deep team with some star power up top. Of course, you can't win without stars, but with like elite level role players, with guys that are all additive on the floor at any given time, lots of shooting, whatever. I think the Knicks have that, honestly. So going for Durant, like if it means, look, if you want to do it with Cat still on board and then you're trading like OG and Mitch or something, like that cuts into a lot of your defensive depth and a lot of what just willed you to the conference finals this year. If you do it for Cat, like you said, you're then basically making a bet of like, okay, well, we're gonna make this move and we feel like we can capitalize on the like 2 years that we'll get left of Durant's prime in the way that it is right now, which honestly his prime has already been extended a couple times that I didn't fully expect it to. In terms of like him being, I think the offense will always be there till the day he dies, but the defense is held up a little better than I would have thought it ever would have. So you do that, or like you said, I mean, if they want to get real creative and still try to keep like OG and Cat, I guess then you could structure something that'll be like Mikhail, Mitch, and Josh Hart gets you close to the salary, or maybe even right on. But that's like so much depth to give up just to add Kevin Durant, and it's like I don't want Durant necessarily playing like 40 minutes a night anymore either to make up for all that minute loss that you just deal with there. As hilarious as it would be for everything to come full circle and Mikhail to get traded back to Phoenix for Kevin Durant after multiple other moves around the league. But yeah, I don't know. It just, to me, I'm not really on board, but that's just me. And I'm definitely lower on Durant than most, I feel like. And it mostly just stems from, to me, I feel like he's got like the anti-Midas touch where everything he touches just kind of turns to crap rather than turning to gold. And even the titles that he won, he essentially glommed onto a team that already had won a title and already was ready to win multiple more titles. and just happened to be along for the ride and help them dominate for those titles. So I don't know. I'm not super on board with it, but hopefully, hopefully we won't have to have this conversation again. And he just gets traded to San Antonio by draft night or something, because it seems like that's sort of the writing on the wall of what seems like it's probably going to happen at this point.
Yeah, look, I would feel excited and also a sense of impending doom, I think, if they traded for Kevin Durant. But you know what? That's pretty true for all of our lives in general these days. So on that happy note, we'll wrap up this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. More draft coverage, more coach coverage, and if necessary, yes, more Kevin Durant coverage here on Locked On Knicks.